Would you rather have a small peepee and a big cap, or a big peepee and a huge cock? Get your mind out of the gutter. I'm talking purchase price, cap rate, and cash on cash return. In this video, I'm going to explain to you the difference between cap rate and cash on cash return and how your purchase price affects these two variables. So when you're negotiating multifamily, you'll know if you should be focusing on the cap rate, the cash on cash return, if you should be lowering the purchase price, if you should be giving a bigger down payment but less interest rate. What do you do to negotiate multifamily? I'm going to teach you everything you need to know so you can start investing in wholesaling multifamily, making millions of dollars or $100,000 plus assignment fees. PP cap and cock is what you need to know to become a successful multifamily investor and wholesaler. So let me show you. Y'all already know what the purchase price is. It's when you buy a property. It's the price you pay for a property, the purchase price. So we don't really need to talk about that now. But what I want to focus on is the cap rate versus the cash on cash return. And we abbreviate this COC. So what is cap rate? What is cash on cash return? Let me explain. Let's say you're going and looking at a multifamily property. Here we are on LoopNet. This is the Zillow of multifamily, the Zillow of commercial. I'm going to pick a property at random. You ready? This one. And we're going to click it. Okay, never mind. Let's choose another one. A property at totally random. This one. And we click it. Dude, what the hell? A third try, a property at totally random. And here we go. Finally, most properties have it. That was just bad coincidence. Here it says 5.75% cap rate. In commercial, everybody uses cap rate. You look at cap rate before you look at price. You look at cap rate before you drink coffee in the morning. Cap rate is how you look at everything. When you're looking at a residential property, let's say we whip out and we choose a random property on Zillow. What do you look at Zillow? Okay, what the hell is that property? What do you look at Zillow? You look at, well, this is a nice house. Do you look at the purchase price and then you see what the monthly payments are? But that's where your mind goes. It's like, oh, that's expensive. That's the purchase price. In multifamily, it doesn't work that way. You immediately look at the cap rate and you're like, oh, that's cheap. That's expensive. That's how multifamily works. And what is cap rate? So cap rate is the net operating income divided by the purchase price. And that's why I was saying that purchase price, PP, is so important because it is an integral part of the cap rate and also the cash on cash formulas. Now, net operating income is a fancy word for saying your profit. This is your profit. And how do you calculate NOI? Well, you take the rent and you subtract it because your rent is your revenue. So you take all of your revenue, that's usually just rent, and you subtract it by your expenses. And that's how you get NOI. Now, expenses are going to be many things. You could have taxes. You can have insurance. You can have management. You have so many things that go into expenses. When you're calling multifamily, ask the sellers for their T12, their trailing 12 months income statements. It will show them all their revenue, all their expenses. Ask them for their offering memorandums. It will show you some stuff. Ask them for their rent rolls. It will show you their rents. Ask them for documentation. Then you can see, okay, these are the rents. Okay, these are their expenses. Now, a little tip to you all is these realtors on all of these sites or these sellers are going to try to inflate their rents and they're going to try to deflate their expenses. So you need to go in there with a thorough eye and be like, those aren't your actual rents. That's your rent projections. I'm going to go off of your actual rents. Or they're going to show you expenses and maybe they'll just forget to include taxes. You're like, why did you forget taxes? Oh, I'm sorry. I just forgot to put them in there. No, you didn't forget. You didn't forget. Let's be honest, you didn't forget. That happens all the time. A quick rule of thumb I use, a really quick rule of thumb is called the 50% rule. 50% rule. Y'all are going to love this rule. I'm going to make your life so much easier. Let's choose a random property. Ready? We're going to do this again. This time I hope it works. We're going to choose this random property. Shady Dell Townhomes. Why is every single apartment called Shady something? I mean, you know, it's always shady something. Anyways, and they say their cap rate is 6.7%. Is that good or is that bad? Well, that's a tough question to ask. But let me just show you how to calculate it real quick. I open up their offering memorandum, and this place has 44 units. And it says the average effective rent is $1,250 per unit. We see average market rent $1,350. Here they do it again. They're like, we're only charging $1,250 for rent, but if you bought this place, you could bump it up to $1,350. Well, if it was that easy, why didn't you already bump it up to $1,350 and then sell a property for more, huh? Between us, usually go off of the current rent. Go off of their projections. But anyways, quick math would dictate that their total rent is about $650,000. So if their rent is $650,000 and we're trying to find their cap rate, remember that cap rate is NOI divided by purchase price. We got to get NOI first, and NOI is rent minus expenses. So 650,000, what are all their expenses? Well, we need to ask for the T12, but we don't have all those numbers. So what are we going to do in the back of our head? The 50% rule. And what we're going to do is we're just going to say, hey, expenses are 50% of rent. Is this perfect? No, but it's pretty close. So that means that expenses would be 325,000, and that means your NOI, what you're left over with, is $325,000. It's half. So if your NOI is 325,000, then you would divide that by the purchase price, which they want $7.26 million. Now, what do I get? I get a whopping 4.25% cap rate. But wait, they said their cap rate was 6.7%. So who's right, me or them? Well, my numbers are assuming a 50% expense ratio. Maybe their expenses are 35, 40, 45%, not 50. So it's probably closer to theirs, but maybe a little bit lower. Maybe the cap rate is 5.5 or 6%. Again, I don't have all the numbers in front of me, but I like to run numbers very conservatively at 50%. And if I still get a good cap rate, if this deal still makes sense, then I know I'm safe because my expense ratio is probably gonna be closer to 30 to 40% and not 50%. Okay, I just did the math, and on my phone, I figured out that if you only take 30% expense ratio, so the rent is 650, and let's say expenses are only 30% of that, you end up with their cap rate, right? So they're saying expenses are closer to 30%. In reality, it's probably going to be maybe 35, 40%, could even be 45%, could be 50, depends on the property. So you just need to look through their numbers. Anyways, I just want to go through that to show that they inflate numbers and we need to come in low conservatively, and then we usually meet somewhere in between. You just want to be safe when you're running your numbers. But that's how you calculate cap rate. It's that easy. And cap rate's a really complicated formula, and it means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And in the world of creative finance, we don't really use cap rate that much. We use COC, or cash on cash return, but it's still important to understand cap rate when you're doing multifamily for a lot of different reasons. When we're buying real estate, we want to find good cap rates. We want to find high cap rates because when you buy a deal that's a high cap rate, it means that you have potential to increase the net operating income, to go in and add value. And when you add value, you'll make the property worth more. And it actually means that when you sell it, you'll get a lower cap rate. I know that's super confusing and it may not make a lot of sense, but just know that you are going to want to look for deals with high cap rates. And what does high cap rate mean? Well, it depends on your area. But in the downtown districts, a fixed up property that's super nice may have a 3 or 4 or 5% cap rate. That's low, but it's fixed up and it's in a great area, which means that there's not a lot of value you can add to it. The value's already been maximized. So you want to find cap rates in the best area possible that's going to get a lot of growth, but that you can also add value to. Try to find cap rates closer to 7, 8, 9, 10%. Now, just because you found a deal that's at a 10 or 11 or 12% cap rate, does that make it a good deal? No, because it could be in the middle of nowhere and that area could be terrible where there's crime, and even fixing up the property won't make it worth much, and the occupancy rate is garbage and will never get higher. That it doesn't mean it's a good deal, but for the most part, a higher cap rate tends to mean a better deal. Hey, if you're liking this video, subscribe. I'm gonna teach you everything you need to know about investing in creative finance, residential and multifamily real estate. You wanna learn to underwrite? I got you. If you wanna learn anything, subscribe to this channel. I'll even teach you French. Mais tu veux apprendre comment parler français? Demande-moi. Mais bien sûr, juste demande-moi. Subscribe. Subscribe. So now we understand how to calculate cap rate, right? It's just taking the net operating income divided by the purchase price, and we're trying to find a cap rate as high as possible. And if we want a higher cap rate, something we can do is just say, hey, I'm going to pay you less money for the property, right? If you lower the PP, your cap goes up. It's an inverse relationship. So if you're trying to buy a deal, and let's say it's a 6 cap and you really need a 7 cap, you can be like, hey, I got to lower the purchase price 10 or 20%. That's one solution. And cap really comes into effect when you're negotiating creative finance deals where they're going to do a balloon, right? If we're going to hold a property for 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, we don't really care too much about the price we pay. It becomes less and less important, the price we pay, because If you're holding a property for 30, 40, 50 years, the purchase price is gonna, why did I write a B? The purchase price is gonna go up because it's been so long. But if we only have 5 years to fix up this property and we have to sell it or refinance because of a balloon, let's say a 5-year balloon, a 3-year balloon, 5-year balloon, 7-year balloons, those are all really common. Well, then the purchase price matters. So that's where cap rate comes into effect. Cap rate's really important when you start to get short-term balloons. But if we don't really have a balloon or a balloon is 10 years or longer, then we're really just focusing on COC or cash on cash return. COC always matters. Everybody loves a big COC, but a big COC is most important, and COC is the most important thing when we're talking about deals where we're holding for the long term. Otherwise, cap's important. But the longer we're holding a deal, COC becomes more and more important. If you're a little bit confused about what I just said, I'll explain it a little bit more soon. But let's talk about COC. Cash on cash return. This is the most important formula to all of creative finance. And COC comes into play when we're doing seller finance or when we're doing, subject to. So seller finance and sub two. Also, loan assumptions, but that has to do with sub two. And really the only two differences that COC has over cap is that you have to add in debt servicing costs because we have debt, right? We're taking over someone's loan subject to, or we're doing seller financing. So you have debt, but you also need to add in the entry fee. We're not focusing on our PP anymore. We're focusing on the entry fee. So if cap was net operating income profit divided by purchase price, COC is net operating income minus debt servicing costs divided by entry fee. This is pretty much saying how much money is the amount of money that you're putting into deal returning for you. Not about the value of the property, the purchase price, nothing. Not like cap. This is saying, hey, I'm going to put 100 grand in. How much money is my 100 grand going to make me? We call NOI minus debt servicing. There's actually a word for this. It's called CFADs. This is cash flow after debt servicing. So you actually want your CFADs divided by your entry fee. And that's how you get COC. And our goal in creative finance is to find a nice COC.
Nice COC.
So really quickly, we're going to take that last example. Let's say we have $650,000 in rent, right? That's our rent. And we're going to say, hey, our expenses are 50%, right? We're just going to say they're 50%. So now we're at $325,000 in net operating income. If you divided that by purchase price, you would get cap. But we're looking at COC. We're looking at cash on cash return. So what do we have to do? Well, we have to subtract the debt servicing costs. And how much is that? Well, you have to see how much you're going to pay every single month for seller financing. How much is that loan payment on the subject to, right? You can use a loan amortization calculator to find that. So you would subtract that. I have a lot of videos on that, but let's just say that, hey, that's $100,000 a month in debt. All right. So you subtract your debt payments. Now you're at 225. So we have 225 is our CFADs. Our cash flow after debt servicing is 225. Now we're going to divide that not by the PP. We're going to divide that by the entry fee. Hey, I'm going to buy this deal at a 6% interest rate, 30-year amortization, but we got to do 10% down. Okay, so if 10% down, let's say that's, $700,000 down. Let's just say that's our entry fee for the sake of this video. That is not a 4 or 5 or 6% return. No, that's a 32% COC. Now that is a nice COC. In creative finance, I really shoot for COC above 10%. I want to see a higher than 10% COC, but that's usually the bare minimum. If I can push a 20% COC, that's amazing. That's incredible. And some tips to get your COC up. So let's say you want to get your COC up. How do you get your COC up? Well, I told you how you get your cap up, right? It's by lowering the purchase price. Well, COC, you got a lot more options to get it up. If you want to get your COC up, we're not talking Viagra. We are talking, you can lower the interest rate on your seller financing, or you can do something called interest only payments, IO payments. That's a really cool trick y'all can use. This is to get your debt servicing costs down. And if you get your monthly debt payments down, you get your CFADs up, which gets your COC up. Another thing you guys can do is, let's say you want to defer payments. Like, hey, no, I got to defer payments. Another thing y'all can do is just get your down payment down. This is the biggest one. If you can get a lower down payment, your COC is so happy. It gets so much taller. It gets so much higher. Your COC just goes straight up. Okay, let's just summarize what we're learning here. This is getting a little too phallic. Let's take a step back. We have cap rate. And cap rate is the go-to formula in all of commercial. but it's for cash commercial. It's just saying, hey, if I bought this property cash, it'd make me this much money, and if I divide that by the price I'm paying, this is my cap rate. It's a little low. I want a higher cap rate. Oh, this property has a high cap rate. If I add value to it, I could sell it again in 3 5 years. I can flip it, and I'm gonna make a ton of money. That's the world of cap rate. That's all it is. But when we're talking creative finance, then we're using cock. Then we're using cash on cash return because we're not putting in the whole purchase price, right? We're not buying this cash. We're putting in a small amount and we're using leverage. We're using other people's money to buy this property. But then we also have debt servicing costs. We have all these things. Cap rate really matters when there is a balloon. If you're looking at a deal and your exit strategy is within, 5 years, I would say 5 years or less, you really need to focus on this cap rate. You need this cap rate to be high. Try to find a cap rate above 6%. Again, this is a very general rule. It's going to depend on your area. California is going to be a lot less than Texas, and Texas is going to be a lot less than Alabama. So try to find a cap rate as close as 10 as possible, but don't fall into a value trap. Now with cash on cash return really matters when you're looking at long-term loans. So if we have something that's going to be over 5 years, you're going to be holding this property for long term, you want to know how much your money is making you. And when you're doing seller finance or subject to, you have to calculate the cash on cash return. And we're trying to find cash on cash return above 10%, ideally closer to 20%. This is where you'll be making a lot of money. You'll be able to get closer to 20% cash on cash return when you're talking, 5 years or less balloons, right? Because you're going to make a lot more money quicker and then you're going to have to refinance. If you're looking at long term, like you're going to buy a property with maybe a 20-year amortization. So let's say there's $1 million property and you negotiate 5% interest at a 30-year am with a 10% down payment. Well, there's no balloon here. So I'm going to tell you right now, you're not going to get a 20% cash on cash return. That'd be ridiculous because your 20% is going to compound every year for 30 years. It's going to be the best. I'd buy that deal right now. If you have that deal, send it to me. I'll buy it. But even if you got a 10%, cock, that's a nice cock. But if you're looking at deals where, it's less than, you're only going to own it for 3 years because there's a balloon in 3 years, oftentimes you can convince the sellers to give you a really good cash on cash return. It's like, hey, I got to get a 30% annual cash on cash return, right? So that's the difference. You'll see that more in your negotiations. Are you still confused about how to underwrite multifamily? It's okay. Join my free Discord. It's in the description down below. Come in there, hang out, and we'll teach you how to underwrite multifamily real estate, and you can JV with us. Send me your deals. I'll lock them up and I'll dispo them and we will split the profits. Sounds good to me. But anyways, what I really want to stress in this video is just the difference between cap rate and cash on cash return. When you are looking at multifamily properties, you have to know this. This is a no-brainer. What I just did here has to be something that you can do in the back of your head real quick. This is like calculating PITI and cash flow in residential. You got to know this if you want to get wholesaling commercial real estate. All right, thanks everyone, and I'll talk to you later.